Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I warmly welcome you to today's event. I'm Imme Scholz, one of the directors of the foundation, and I'm very pleased about this evening. We have gathered here to discuss a topic that should actually be self-evident: the protection of medical personnel and facilities in war. Healthcare is not a target. This statement is not a slogan, but a core principle of international humanitarian law. The Geneva Convention obliges all parties to a conflict to protect hospitals, doctors, nursing staff, and patients. And yet, today, as in the past, we see that this very protection is repeatedly undermined or deliberately violated. Most recently, we were shocked by the double strike on the Nasser hospital in Gaza on August 25th, an attack in which a clinic was first hit, and then rescue workers and journalists were shot and killed again while attempting to help. And a CNN report has since revealed that a third attack was coordinated almost simultaneously with the second. Such acts not only violate international law, they also disregard fundamental human rights. According to the World Health Organization, approximately 94% of all hospitals in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed without any solid evidence that they were used for terrorist purposes, and about half of them are no longer operational. Medical equipment is no longer available, and there's hardly any staff left. Facilities that still exist are working beyond their capacity and under inhuman conditions, for example, in tents without electricity, without clean water, medicine, or sterilization, and even anesthetics are lacking. As a foundation, we have already worked on the systematic attacks on hospitals during the war in Syria, where the targeted bombing of medical infrastructure has become a true war strategy. And in other contexts too, whether in Sudan, Yemen, in Ukraine, we see that medical neutrality is too often disregarded, with horrible consequences for the civilian population. I'm delighted that some of the organizations that document what is happening on the ground and call on governments and the international community to prevent these attacks are here with us today. How can international law be strengthened? How can doctors, paramedics, and hospitals be better protected? And what role can documentaries such as the film we are about to see play in the making the voices of those affected heard? The film Gaza Doctors Under Attack impressively shows the reality for doctors and nurses who risk their lives to save human lives and become targets themselves. It was scheduled to be broadcast by the BBC in February 2025, but after approval, it underwent an internal review due to allegedly political sensitive content. More than 600 prominent figures signed an open letter demanding that the film has to be broadcast. However, the BBC decided instead to transfer the rights to the production company Basement Films. The film has been available to watch on Channel 4 since July 2nd, and Zitero has released it worldwide. Film critic Stuart Heritage wrote in The Guardian, "This crucial film is a stuff of nightmares, but the world needs to see it." Well, this is why we are going to see tonight. I look forward to discussing it with our guests and with all of you, and I hope we all see the film and the conversation not only as an analysis, but also as a call to action. Thank you very much.
So welcome. Thank you for coming here directly from the airport. Ramita Nawal is a British-Iranian investigative journalist, documentary filmmaker, and author. She has been awarded with the Emmy and the Robert F. Kennedy Award twice, and she's known for working under extremely challenging conditions. She has reported from over 40 countries, filmed and produced more than 30 documentaries, films, and reports, and she's worked as an international correspondent for print media. It's a pleasure to have you here, and of course, thank you very much for the film. The situation has worsened after the film was made. So I'd like to start with the question, do you still have contact with the people in the film? Do you know how they are?
Yes, thank you everyone, by the way, for coming. Yes, I do. So you said the situation has worsened. A few days ago, I counted the number of direct attacks against hospitals and medical centers since we made this, since we updated this script 3 months ago, and it's over 30 direct attacks in the last 3 months, including the attack against Nasser Hospital, which killed, I think, over 20 people, I think it's 22 people, 5 journalists, 5 healthcare workers, and injured many, many more. Dr. Khaled al-Sir was at Nasser during that attack, and I am still in touch with him. I told him that I was coming to this screening, and he actually wrote a message for me to read to everybody about what it's like there. And I'm in touch with Khaled quite regularly. Oh, actually, put my glasses on. Right, so he wrote, "Our hospitals are no longer places of healing, but corridors of agony. We treat the injured on cold floors, with no medicines, no equipment, no blood, nothing but our bare hands and our broken will. It's been quite emotional being in touch with our doctors, having spent so long communicating with them. So I'm just going to get myself together. I find it very difficult to read this without crying. I'm sorry, my apologies. No equipment, no blood, nothing but our bare hands and our broken will. Sometimes we are forced to watch lives slip away, not because their wounds were beyond saving, but because we had nothing left to give. Our bodies are drained from endless work, and our souls are shattered by the horrors we are forced to witness. Our medical staff suffered since the beginning of the genocide. They arrest us, they kill us, they bomb us, our hospitals, but we still stay, because we are the last thin thread of hope for the wounded who cling to life. We stay because if we stop, there will be no one left to save them. And yet, despite all this darkness, we hold on to a flicker of hope. Hope that this injustice will end. Hope that the world will not stay silent. Hope that you, the free people of the world, will rise and stand with us and fight for justice. We are begging you, do not let our voices vanish in the rubble. Do not let our children's blood be spilled in vain. Stand with us and help us end this genocide." So is there simultaneous translation going on? Can I carry on?
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, so that he messaged me. He worked all night last night and messaged me this morning. That was his message. Dr. Abeid is still in detention, and it's been reported that he's been tortured. Dr. Abu Safia is still in detention. His lawyer just released a statement to say that his condition has worsened. He's covered in scabies and boils. There's another update. A fifth healthcare worker, an administrator from Al-Shifa Hospital, has now died in detention. His cellmate said that he was raped and with an implement and his abdomen was ruptured. We're hearing many now reports of sexual abuse and rape.
Kannst du uns was zur Entstehung des Films erzählen?
Can you tell us about how the film was made? How did you get access to the doctors? the hospitals? What were the difficulties you had to overcome in research and when you filmed the film, and how did you experience it?
So actually, it was about a year and a half ago when a doctor, there's a group of international doctors who've been working in Gaza for years, and about a year and a half ago, one of them told a commissioning editor at Channel 4 that doctors were going missing. And this is, a year and a half ago, dozens of doctors had gone missing, and there was a lag between when they'd gone missing and when they turned up in detention. So it was the point where their loved ones didn't know where they were, because the Israelis don't announce it and don't tell you. And usually you have to get lawyers to phone every single detention center, and even then sometimes they don't tell you. So we knew something was happening. And then, of course, 3 months later, they start turning up in detention. And then 3 months after that, some of them start getting released, and they're all talking about torture. So that's when the story happened, and we realized there's more to this. We also looked at the patterns of attacks against the hospitals. They broadly follow a kind of north-south, where Israel was trying to ethnically cleanse areas and move the population south. And we worked on it for about a year. We were ready to broadcast. I don't know how many people here know this, but it was meant to be for Channel 4. It didn't happen. We ended up making this for the BBC, and the BBC refused to run it. And so that was a big story in England, and Channel 4 ended up taking it again. In terms of how we made it, the most frightening thing for us was that we had 2 Palestinian producers, brilliant journalists, one in the north, one in the south. And of course, every time we sent them out to interview doctors, because journalists can't get into Gaza, we were really worried for their lives. We were really concerned about their safety. As you know, over 200 journalists have been killed by Israel so far, many of them in targeted attacks. Both of our journalists, Osama and Jabba, are still alive, thank God. But Osama is currently in Gaza City, again, scared for his life. Scared for his life, firstly, because the Israelis launched a smear campaign against him, which is what they do before they kill journalists. So I don't know if anybody knows this, but there was a recent investigation by an Israeli journalist called Yuval Abraham, and it exposed an Israeli military special unit called the Legitimization Cell, which orchestrates smear campaigns against Palestinian journalists in order to justify their subsequent killing. That's what they do. And so there was a smear campaign against our producer, Osama. So he was terrified, and then, of course, now he's terrified for his life all over again, because Gaza City, as we speak, is being flattened, and he's stuck there.
What touched you most in the stories of the medics? You just read out the message, you're still in contact. What touched you most when you made the film, or were there scenes that you as a team decided not to show them?
What touched me most was the absolute dedication of these doctors. You know, they would be tortured really badly, some of them, and actually that's what we left out. There's lots of testimony of torture that was really, really horrific. And they'd be dumped either on the border in Gaza or somewhere in Gaza. So they'd literally be thrown out. So they'd been taken from detention after they'd served. We said in the film, didn't we? Not one of them they've all been released without charge, right? So this is, this is pretty psychological what they're doing. They're trying to break them. Then they'd be dumped in Gaza, and they wouldn't know where they were, and they were scared. They'd find their way to the local hospital and start working. And often, I don't think we had this, can't remember if we had this in the film. In the end, we had lots of testimony. I don't think we did. We had lots of testimony of surgeons whose hands were broken, and they were told by the Israelis, "You are never going to work again." And every single one went back to work, even if they couldn't perform surgery.
Was waren denn insgesamt die Reaktionen auf den Film?
What were the reactions to the film? We know BBC's reaction. They didn't want to show the film. You got it to Channel 4, released it there. It's shown in situ as well, but behind a paywall. What were the reactions in general when the film was shown? And maybe you could give us the BBC story. What was the challenge there?
Do you know what?
The charge.
Before I do that, actually, I quickly want to talk about two other elements of the story. There are quite a few that we didn't end up in the film that I think are important. The first is doctors we know, these international doctors, did a brilliant investigation about medical equipment being purposefully vandalized and destroyed. That didn't make it in the film.
Es gibt aber Videos dazu, oder?
There are videos about this, videos that are put online where you see soldiers
Krankenhäuser vandalisieren.
vandalizing hospitals. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, but then this medical group did a real forensic investigation of that. And have gathered lots of evidence, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, all the evidence, as you say, is out there for us to see. So there were lots of elements like that. Also, amputations. You know, actually, Israeli doctors were speaking out about the amputations because detainees were tied so tightly that at one point, you know, there was at least one amputation a week having to happen because Israeli detainees were because Palestinian detainees were tied, so they had their hands and feet tied so tightly. As for the BBC story, well, the reaction, the BBC inadvertently gave us a lot of publicity because it turned into a big story in England. And the BBC have also been, yes, they have their own version of events of what happened, which is untrue. So I think, yeah, I won't talk for long, but I think the important things to say are that in my 22-year career, I have never been in editorial meetings where lobby groups and lobbyists are mentioned by name. And to me, that was shocking, that in editorial meetings at the BBC, pro-Israel lobby groups and lobbyists would be mentioned by name. And to think that lobby groups and lobbyists were informing and influencing BBC journalism. We really fought back against that. And I was lucky, Kareem, our brilliant director, and I, this is our third film together. We were really lucky that our exec is called Ben de Peer. He's the former editor of Channel 4 News. So he used his influence and his power as the former editor of Channel 4 News, dealing with senior BBC execs that, you know, once upon a time were his colleagues. So he wasn't afraid of standing up to them, and he is fearless. And so it's thanks to him that we managed to push back against BBC censorship, I would say, on this issue. And we've had many BBC journalists contact us privately saying they're really unhappy with the fact that their coverage is influenced by these lobby groups. And yeah, so they kept telling us they were going to transmit from January onwards for many, many months. They finally told us the only way they would transmit this film is if I was taken off as a reporter. They were worried about the optics of an Iranian woman who they presumed to be Muslim fronting this film. And they said that I should be interviewed alongside Palestinians. So I would be a contributor in this film in order that I can explain my journalism for full transparency. I mean, it's really absurd. They told me to think of it as an entertainment program. There's a program, I don't know if you have it in here in Germany, it's called Who Do You Think You Are?, where kind of a minor celebrity goes in search of their roots. It was really, really quite extraordinary. So, of course, Ben and I told them to F off. Ben told them in those words, actually, in a completely crazy meeting. And it was at that point that they realized we weren't going to play ball. And Ben said, we're not changing one shot. They wanted to change shots. And by the way, at this point, the film had been completely agreed by the leadership team. It had been signed off. And the film you are seeing is almost identical to the film that BBC did sign off. And then negotiations started with them because they decided to release the film to us. Subsequently, what's happened is that the BBC Director General and the CEO of News have publicly said that the reason they didn't show it is because of comments I made when Israel started bombing Iran. And I'm originally Iranian, and I covered Iran for a newspaper. I've covered Iran for 20 years. So as an expert on Iran, I was on the news, BBC News, giving analysis about this, and I called Israel a rogue state in my, analysis as an analyst. And so then that all kicked off, and the BBC said that the reason they dropped it, first of all, they said was a perception of partiality. So you're either partial or you're not, right? So it's quite revealing, their comment, that they were worried about the perception of partiality given my statements on Israel when I called Israel a rogue state. And just so you know, there is also a freelance journalist like me of equal standing who still works for the BBC, who's called America a rogue state. That's allowed, but yes, this isn't allowed. Anyway, they said that, having said that, they were lying because they had agreed 4 weeks before I made these comments that they wouldn't show the film. So now you know the full drama of what's been happening. And actually, yesterday, the Director General again reiterated this in a parliamentary session. So again, there's a lot of scrutiny around this film and why the BBC wouldn't show this film.
So we are even happier then in this light that we could show the film here. And again, the question, what were the reactions of those people who watched it? Do you have the impression that it gave more attention to the doctors in Gaza? Do you have the impression that it has a political impact? What were the receptions of the film as far as you could perceive?
God, the reception has been amazing. We've had screenings all around England. It sparked off a lot of debate. The BBC itself started covering the story properly on the news, which we were really happy about. It is a great institution. There are brilliant journalists there. And this sparked other media organizations to look at this particular story. And we're hoping that this will be part of a body of evidence that will be used to hold people to account. And we're hoping that that will happen.
Thank you, Ramita. I would like to invite the other panelists, Julia Ducho, General Secretary Amnesty International. Welcome. And Lara Dovifat, Head of the Advocacy Department of Doctors Without Borders, Germany. Welcome. And online, we should have Guy Shalev, Director of Physicians for Human Rights in Israel. Welcome, Guy. So welcome. Thank you that you are here. I would like to start with Guy and Lara. Doctors, due to the restriction of international reporting, as Ramita has just said, and the attacks on Palestinian journalists are important witnesses on site. The film highlights a number of different aspects, dangerous evacuation practices, evacuating of hospitals, targeted attacks of aid staff, black zones. Does that correspond to what your colleagues are going through in Gaza, Guy?
Yes, definitely. We are in constant connection and communication with our colleagues in Gaza, as an organization that has been sending delegations to Gaza for 15 years, more than 100 delegations. So we have very good connections with doctors, the administrators. So we make sure to communicate with them, see what their needs are, what they see on the ground. And doctors are definitely, as you said, are very powerful witnesses. They see what happens on the ground. They see the people who get injured and get evacuated to their departments, and they have the professional skills to see the causes of pain, whether it's starvation, the diseases that spread around, or injuries. So we see that as a very important voice to listen to.
Danke, Guy. Und Lara, ist es ähnlich bei euch?
Thank you. And Lara, is it similar with you? Yes, we see that in our everyday work. We have over 1,500 staff on site, most of them Palestinian colleagues, and we are very grateful to them. I think it's very difficult looking at the film. There's many colleagues I know who work for us, with us. In the film, I think it's very difficult. 12 of my colleagues have been killed in this war, and they are detained still. It's not clear where they are, but we do know that torture is happening. That is everyday life. We're still there. We try to provide medical aid, which is getting more and more difficult, especially now with what's happening as we speak here in Gaza City. So for us, it's getting more and more difficult to do our job. We see beside the attacks, the health infrastructure is strongly militarized, as well as the humanitarian aid is. It is marginalized. People can't work. We see other actors coming in, heavily armed. Many of you have heard of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundations. And there is a report now documenting that there is mass shootings taking place while people are trying to organize some kind of food. We've seen that specifically people are shot in the upper body, and we've tried to rescue people in the hospitals, but many arrive dead in the hospitals. That's everyday life there.
Guy,
Physicians for Human Rights Israel in February has published a report on detention and torture of health staff. We've seen this in the film. On 28th of July, you have published a report that looks at the systematic destruction of the health system as one dimension of the genocide in Gaza. What moved you to do that? And you've done that together with B'Tselem. So you were the first Israeli organizations that published genocide reports. What moved you to do that? And what are the most important findings of the report?
Right. So as you said, we published a report on the detention of medical teams, medical staff in February, in which we detail their detention, the conditions of how they're being held, how they're treated, medical neglect, sexual abuse, everything that you've seen in this very painful film. And I want to thank the film, the filmmaker, which really is such a powerful document to show the reality that we are seeing on the ground from testimonies we are collecting. In approaching the work on our the genocide report, I think that we have been working very in emergency mode for almost 2 years, collecting the information of all the different ways that Israel is attacking intentionally the Gazan healthcare system. And then we needed to take everything together, to take all these different elements and see how they are being propagated together against the Gazan healthcare system. And then in this report, what we are looking at, I would say, 6 different ways in which the ability of Palestinians in Gaza to survive is being just impossible. And one is the attack on infrastructure. We've seen that in the film very clearly. Attack on hospital, attack on hygiene facilities, on wash facilities. And the other is the killing and detention of medical workers. And as we've heard also in the film, destroying a building, destroying an MRI machine is very detrimental. It causes a lot of pain, and many patients cannot get treated, but these can be replaced somehow and rebuilt. Killing more than 1,600 doctors and medical workers is something that will take many, many years to train. All the leading doctors, the directors of departments of hospitals being killed in such a way that for many, many years from now, the Gazan healthcare system will have many challenges in order to rebuild itself. Another aspect is blocking of medical evacuation. So Israel attacked all infrastructure, killed medical personnel. So a lot of the treatments are just not available in the Gaza Strip. And then people who need this treatment urgently are blocked from leaving the Gaza Strip in order to get treatment. More than 14,000 people are waiting for medical evacuations. Hundreds, over 700 already died just waiting for medical evacuation. So Israel is blocking that option for them to survive. Just imagine your father, a cancer patient, just dying slowly without being able to get treatment. It's just terrible. An attack on conditions of life, on food, on water, starvation, right? We see the attack on agriculture, on bakeries, on community kitchens, everything that allow a society to survive. And then there's the blocking of aid, of humanitarian aid that we've been discussing for 2 years now, with periods of time where it's totally blocked, such as the one we've seen between March and May, that led to the starvation that we are seeing these days. And sometimes it's just this kind of partial blocking and not allowing enough not for Israel to be maybe attacked internationally, but also not allowing the food in, or the medications and the equipment that is needed in a way that can allow them to survive. So we're taking all this together, and we're seeing how all these are the result of policies. These are not just decisions taken by a soldier on the ground. A decision to attack hospital after hospital. A decision already in October 13, Israel issued 22 evacuation orders for hospitals. This is what would more than 1 million people do without hospitals, all the northern side of the Strip, just 5 days into the attack. So these are policies that are being taken by the highest ranking politicians and military officers. And that is why we see this as an intentional attack on the conditions of life of Palestinians, and that's why this is a genocide.
The other
dimensions, the starvation, which is officially a starvation now. In the film, it was not yet the case, also affects medical staff, just as it does journalists, that the medical staff have to fight for their own survival and at the same time fighting for the survival of others. Coming back to you and Doctors Without Borders, you are publicly very well visible to protect the remains of the health system in Gaza. What are you doing now as an organization on site? You've just said how reduced the staff is already and how limited it is, what you can do. How close are you, and what do you focus your advocacy work, your political work in Germany and internationally? Well, maybe the first point, I said we are there with over 1,000 colleagues. As of today afternoon, we're working in 12 hospitals across the Strip. quite widely spread. We work with mobile clinics as well, which is very important because we don't have the hospitals, but we still need to supply the people. We know lots of psychological, sociological, health care. The children are traumatized, and we treat that. Children have completely stopped talking, for example. We do lots of mother-child health food programs. We are the biggest supplier of drinking water at the moment. That's an important point, which was just mentioned. It's not just the hospitals that are destroyed. We see patterns that contribute to the need of medical supply being much higher than other populations. We see the targeted blocking of food. The lorries are counted, but I think it's very clear that doesn't make sense because it needs much, much, much more. It's not enough to say there's 20 lorries and maybe 30 tomorrow and an airdrop by the German military. No, that's not the point. We see a targeted destruction of the drinking water systems, for example. Our experience is that 11% of the approved desalination plants that we can wanted to bring in is approved. So we see a pattern here that this is specifically blocked. This is not only a disaster for the people who need the drinking water, but it closes the vicious circle to the medical treatment because we can't treat wounds if we don't have sterile Band-Aids and so on. So we see the fire injuries by the bombarding, by the people living in tents with open fire, with heavy burns. We've seen that in the film. So that leads to a loop that injuries or diarrhea, which could be treated in other circumstances, is not treated now. And that brings us to the second part of the question. What are we focusing on? A ceasefire? Obviously, we, as doctors says, we as doctors can't stop the genocide. Governments can. The German government has a long way to go in that direction. And we also focus on the need of medical evacuation. It's more than cynic that representatives of the German government tell us, well, the people have to be helped on site. Well, where? And we also do see that other countries, other European countries, actually do more. So it's very difficult to do medical evacuations. Doctors Without Borders is involved in that, and we see that, for example, that Spain, France, Canada, Australia, they do receive people, and Germany doesn't, and says that unfortunately we can't do anything. These are the points where I think we all together could shout out louder and get active, because we do see the German blocking. Julia, you are loud. Amnesty International is not a medical organization, but you are a human rights organization. You try to address politics and change it. You evaluate the destruction of the health infrastructure in Gaza as a part of the critical infrastructure which is necessary for the survival of our population. What is your conclusion as an organization? Well, we have published a big report in December 2024, 300 pages, where we gave proof of why we think the Israeli government is committing a suicide on the Palestinian population. We have people on site, and Boudou Hassan, who was seen in the interview in Ramallah. She's one of the researchers for the report. And many, many more, many different methods that we applied really to create that report and look at the different aspects of this targeted Israeli attacks to the hospitals, to the doctors, of the different aid organizations. We gave proof that the basis for life of the population is to be destroyed and is being destroyed with the intent to destroy that group. I would like to point out a couple of things that were indicated in the film as well. I think it's very important, the film. Thank you very, very much for it. And also that it shows the individuals whom we support, who are so dedicated in their work. We should find more strong expressions for that. For us, again and again, we have addressed the Israeli government with all the things that we have documented, and we've asked for an answer. We usually didn't get any. But over the time of the war, again and again, the Israeli government in general said, well, yes, these are individual cases. We would have to investigate. Rarely, I have to say. Usually we had the charge that the Hamas is using these institutions. We'll come to that question in a minute. But the individual cases, it's clear the mass we've heard, 1,800. We think it's over 700 targeted attacks on hospitals are not individual cases. It is systematic. Also, the attacks of individual doctors is systematic. Here, we really have to point out these snipers. That is something to look at. The ETCRR has charged a criminal file with the general attorney against a Munich person who is in the Israeli military, who allegedly has killed people as a sniper close by the Nasser hospital. And again, we can see that there is proof of, or evidence of, targetedly killing civilians. It's civilians. Maybe I can say the European Center of Constitutional and Human Rights, an organization with human rights lawyers that file lawsuits that do not only document but also take cases to court. And the different attacks on Nasser hospital, civilians searched protection in the hospital, and again it was clear the attacks were specifically targeting civilians. Our report provides evidence for that. We've got 15 airstrikes in apartment buildings. And it was clearly they were done at night with a maximum number of civilian casualties. And all these different elements, I could put in more cultural institutions and so on. That shows a pattern that this is genocide, which is done with exactly that intention. Can you, coming from the situation in Gaza in general, comment on the legal basis and the conventions that protect hospitals, aid workers, medical aid workers and patients, and what are the duties and the obligations for the international community and the politicians, and what does violence of these conventions mean if they are in other contexts? Well, in general, we see a global increase of violations of humanitarian rights and increasing number of casualties among civilians globally. We see an erosion of the rights. There's a number of conventions that apply in wartime since 1907, since 1949, the different Geneva agreements, and following that, and the fourth Geneva agreement, it is clearly said that hospitals and doctors and medical staff are under special protection and have to be protected. Of course, there are exceptions, and now looking from the legal point of view, this is what's referred to also in the film, that if hospitals are used as military bases and the enemy to make it an object that fights the enemy, then they can lose protection. And in such, this is a war crime if it is done in this way, that this protected object is made a military object and have it lose the protection by that. But the thing is, if there is doubt, then doubt will prevail, and this is to be considered a civilian institution with special protection. And even if an attack can take place, because the institution has developed to a military institution, it can be attacked. Of course, still civilians have to be protected wherever in humanitarian human rights, and it has to be made sure that this is appropriate, the attack is appropriate. And to show how close, how tight the criteria, even if warriors are treated and their weapons are kept in the hospital, so the combatants are treated, it still makes it stay a hospital with special protection and not a military unit from which the enemy is attacked. So in the film, it was said apparently there was a tunnel. There's no real evidence for this. The other argument is that there were hostages were treated, and one of the doctors says this. Of course, that is no basis to attack this hospital for it to lose that special protection. And in addition to that, also the aid workers have to be protected, and it has to be proven that they have lost their protection as well, that they have become an enemy combatant. And all these evidence are remaining pendent. The government of Israel is not providing them, and so this makes this war crimes that have to be punished. I tried to research this to prepare for tonight. If there is any evidence provided for the bombarding of hospitals in Gaza, and with my limited opportunities, I found hardly anything. The only thing I found was the CCTV film, which was part of the film, with the hostages that were taken to hospitals and the tunnels and arms, but nothing that would kind of prove that there was command centers or anything. So it's true, there is no evidence to destroy these hospitals. Well, we didn't only look at hospitals, we looked at numbers of institutions, we looked at apartment buildings where it was said that Hamas combatants were seen there. We really turned every stone. We looked at every possible source, and we didn't find a single evidence. Lara, I'd like to ask you what other countries and regions attacks on medical infrastructure are used as a war strategy, where we see this being done deliberately. And has that been banned internationally or led to better prediction mechanisms? And why is that failing? It's a good question, and I'm asked this question often. Nowadays, is it a trend? Do we see an increase of this internationally? You can't put it that way, but what we do see is that human rights are bombed to rubble, really, and this is being normalized, and that is dangerous beyond Gaza. We, as Doctors Without Borders, see these patterns for quite a while already. I recall 3rd of October 2015, which is repeating or where we had the hospital bombed in Afghanistan by the American Air Force, and 42 people died, many of our colleagues. In review, the Americans said that was a mistake, and they mistook the coordinates with the Taliban center. We see that notification that hospitals have a special protection, and this is being questioned and disregarded. And we've seen this in the introduction. We've seen this in Syria, where it was done very deliberately, 2016. We observed this in Yemen, and we're seeing it in Ukraine as well. And in Ukraine, we see that many humanitarian aid helpers say they don't want to give their coordinates into the notification system because that increases the chance that their institution will be attacked. And that tells a long story of where we are. Other areas where this is being used as a war weapon, where unfortunately we don't talk much about in Germany here, is Sudan. We don't, in Darfur, for example, in Sudan, we have complete regions where no medical infrastructure exists anymore or is in operation because the safety situation is so disastrous. We see a trend. What should happen? A lot of things should happen after the attack the attack in our hospital in Afghanistan. There was a resolution on the UN level saying, oh, we need better deconfliction, better notifications, and stricter punishment. Well, 10 years later, we sit here and see the images. I think that tells volumes as well. So what would be the most important 2 or 3 points you'd make looking at Gaza? What must be done? It's quite clear that the German federal government should stop immediately all weapon deliveries that kill my colleagues, that kill the civilians on site. And quite clear is also that this approach of the federal government, which is being continued with the Chancellor Merz, the critical friend, so we want to keep up the relationship. We would rather talk critically than talk about sanctions. That has failed, and we know that. We've been knowing this for a while, and there has to be a change in the view of Mr. Merz and Mr. Wadefuhl. On the European level, we have the interesting situation that things are changing. Germany is the biggest blocker at the moment, and the UN high level, the General Assembly, which just started, which is going to address this. Germany is going to be quite isolated, and we are in better hopes that things may turn on that level.
Guy, ihr seid als Organisation in Israel.
An organization in Israel, Gaia, you are present. What do you expect? How are you perceived as an organization? You just have published a report, and have they a critical watch on you, or can you still operate? How is your situation right now, and what do you expect from the politicians and from the international community?
Right. So first, what we expect is, following up on my colleagues, is a very clear voice against this genocide, against the Israeli attack on Gaza. And when I'm saying voice, I don't mean statements. We've seen enough statements. We haven't seen enough actions that really would compel Israel to stop the attack. I can say personally, I've been in Berlin a few times since the war started doing advocacy. I've been meeting with the politicians, with high-ranking officials in the ministry, the foreign ministry, and other ministries. And I've been asking German officials for many months, what are the red lines? And I'm never getting responses for this question. Every time, it's very clear that there are just no red lines. And every time we think maybe Israel has passed a red line, that now the international community will act and stop it. And then we see that Israel sees that. The Israeli government sees that it can again and again attack with no response. And so I'm also based in Israel. We are an organization based in Israel, and there are laws against us calling for sanctions or boycotts or any of that sort. So I will not call for them. But there must be actions in everything that is available in the toolbox of international communities. And we are also, as an organization focused on health, an organization of doctors, we are also talking to doctors all over the world, pushing medical associations to stand together with their colleagues in Gaza. This is a question of also of medical ethics that should be the concern of doctors everywhere, of medical associations everywhere. We want them to be more loud, more powerful in their actions in order to exert pressure on Israel. And there are also very concrete steps that Germany and other countries should demand immediately. The free flow of food, medications, equipment in all ground checkpoints, a corridor. We have been calling for a corridor, a humanitarian corridor between Gaza and the West Bank and Jerusalem, just to get thousands of patients out, because it's been such a difficult attempt to get patients out to third countries. So getting them to hospitals in the West Bank, hospitals in East Jerusalem, who are really pleading for these patients to come, for them to treat them. We can't get enough pressure to do these. These are really simple asks. Israel is not allowing the ICRC into prisons and detention centers. 94 Palestinian detainees already died in Israeli incarceration facilities. Just compare it to 9 people who died in Guantanamo for more than 20 years. So this is a huge amount of detainees who are just dying of medical neglect, of torture, and the ICRC is not getting access. And it's absurd. I mean, it's a demand that every country that is signed on the Geneva Convention should require Israel to follow. Distribution. Israel dismantled the entire distribution system of the UN. UNRWA is being targeted. The UN had more than 400 stations of distributing food and support and aid for the people of Gaza, dismantled totally in order to erect this absurd GHF weaponized project with just 4 stations operating for an average of 23 minutes a day to support more than 2 million people. And you asked about our situation in Israel as an Israel-based organization. That is part of the Israeli attack on Gaza, and that is blocking all kinds of human rights and humanitarian support for Gazans. It starts with the dismantling of UN mechanisms such as UNRWA. Now there's a new registration law that a lot of the international humanitarian organizations are not going to be able to act to work in Gaza anymore because they cannot follow really new and absurd registration regulations. Palestinian organizations who were deemed terrorist organizations already in the previous government in Israel, but now are also the most important 3 Palestinian organizations are now sanctioned by the US. And part of that is also the attack on us, Israel-based organizations. So they're from all these different angles, it's just blocking all ability to document and to advocate for the people of Gaza.
Ja, vielleicht nur kurz als Information an das Publikum. Es sind
very briefly an information for the public. 3 persons have been sanctioned because it has been said that they work for the international tribunal, and they've been sanctioned as well by the US government. I would like to come back to speak about the personal stories. This is the force of the film, the heroes of the film in some kind. All these doctors, you as Amnesty International, you are campaigning for doctors in prison. Dr. Hassam Sifia, who has shown that his son has been killed. He is still in prison. No trial has been organized, so you are campaigning for him. How many cases are covered, and is there any result all of this? I can't give you the figures. We followed different cases, Khaled Esser, for instance.
So we have heard about this from a doctor who was released, and he reported it was important for him that during an interrogation by the military, it was said, well, there is a campaign to release you, and that gave him a lot of power and confidence. So there was a lot of factors that brought this forward. So that's the idea of amnesty, that we write letters to the relatives, to the authorities, and that this sparks hope and gives attention that leads to release. We see that more and more people participate in these activities. With respect to Gaza, lots of things have changed in the discussion in Germany. We've been addressing this topic for a long time. It wasn't easy. So society has changed. Politics hasn't. I think it's a crucial moment now that pressure will be put on the federal government, demanding sanctions now, as the EU is already proposing. So it's on the table. And so the voice of the federal government here is crucial. And so the individual cases are important. They're important to release these people from detention, to give them strength. But it's also important to tell a story. So it's not this gruesome activities are not in vain, and it's about the individual people, and their heroism shows that things can be done, that there are people who have something to oppose this horror. Guy has mentioned this, what's needed, which is that injured people have to be treated in third countries. This is something where the federal government is miserably failing. I don't know if you've got any news in that respect. The latest I have is that still injured children from Gaza are not to be flown in because the federal ministry has these high restrictions as far as safety is concerned with the accompanying people. Has anything changed? I think it is unbearable that in this country it's not even possible to take injured children. Even Italy is doing that. Any news in that respect? No, I think you put it very well. The Ministry for Interior is blocking this. We are very involved in this with little success so far, but it's not only injured children also, yes, but we have a situation which is indescribable, really. And in Gaza, we have no oncological treatments. We can't treat chronic diseases, immune diseases. You may remember this insatiable discussion whether children starve to death or whether they die of chronic diseases. Probably it's both, because they don't have access to medical and therapeutic food. So these are cases really that we have to get into where Germany could do things. We see this in other contexts for Ebola. For example, we were able to get Germany moving forward strongly with high expertise as far as global health is concerned. So in Germany, there is lots of great medical staff and great hospitals who can say, we could do this, we would be capable and able to do it, and we would want to contribute. So it's a political blockage which stops it. And I think I said again, we have to be louder. And the media, surely as well. If we have this type of photo going on, and the main discussion is on whether pictures from Gaza are falsified, and the question is not addressed whether children with existing diseases need special help. That is shattering as well, looking at the level of the discourse here. So, are there questions from the audience? I would like to open the floor a bit to your questions.
Ja, Sie kriegen ein
You'll get a microphone. Wait a minute. Yes, thank you very much for that wonderful report of the panelists. I understand this totally. The report of Amnesty International in December clearly shows the genocide going on in Gaza. One thing I'm missing in the discussion, and it's not been addressed, is that here we have an occupational force which is illegal as such since 1967. And with, in view of the solutions that we are looking at, I think it's very important that we talk about the humanitarian system, a situation in Gaza, and discuss solutions and actions that we want Germany to take. But as long as we don't clearly say, also the Federal Republic, this is an occupation that has to be stopped, we're not going to be able to solve the problems. And the situation in Gaza, a problem didn't start on 7th of October. It has been around since 1967, which is a criminal occupation. It's not just Gaza Strip with the ethnic cleansing. It happens every day in the West Jordan land, in the West Bank. Thousands of refugees, the people are fleeing there. So it's taking place in other places as well. And I think this is crucial. Julia, one point I want to make, of course, we work on the occupation for many, many years already, and we demand an end of the occupation. I think important of the reports by B'Tselem and Human Rights, this new report that a genocide is being carried out on the Palestinian population made the point that this genocide is carried on in the West Bank, and that has to be stopped now. And I think that's a very important point and something that could be detailed on just to create that link. Guy, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I just agree. Yeah, of course, we have to understand. I mean, it's even deeper than that, because if this event is about humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the attack on healthcare, I think it's directly related to humanity and the acceptance of Palestinians as humans, which is something that is being undermined for many, many years. And part of that is allowing a criminal occupation, the apartheid state, to continue. That is part of the dehumanization of Palestinians. I don't think, and I think anyone would think that we would be in this position of extermination, of a genocide, without decades and decades of dehumanization.
Two questions. First of all, thanks a lot for this very touching film and for this panel discussion. This has lacked for a long time, and it is a great opportunity to have this kind of discussion today. So I've got two questions. First of all, it's about the reproductive health. At the very beginning of the war, Israel has destroyed the fertile clinics with the embryos, everything which is in there. And this is a symbol of genocide. Reproductive health is attacked in a society. Maybe you can speak about this subject, health, female health. How can you guarantee it? How can you still bring up your children under those conditions? And the second question, I don't know if somebody can react. Where is the solidarity of the German doctors? Why isn't there any solidarity? I am a journalist. The journalists either don't are solidaric with their colleagues. It's very bad. I'm ashamed about that. In England, we saw doctors have shown solidarity. We haven't seen this in Germany. Thank you. Lara?
Okay, concerning the first point, the situation of delivering women and pregnant women, it's difficult to talk about this. It's disastrous. We have a focus at Doctors Without Borders to support pregnant women and newly born babies. We see a need, but triggered by the food crisis, the malnutrition, we see a great increase in the number of miscarriages. And that, again, leads us to a vicious cycle that we can't support the early born children. There's not enough incubators. And we have power failures because the fuel for the generators is missing. And in June alone, 5 children died who were early deliveries. And we see these inhumane conditions under which the women have to live. They deliver, if they are lucky, in a hospital where my colleagues work, but then they are sent back to the tents where they have to carry on. And very impressive, again, we would need wheelchairs, for example, to at least give these women a wheelchair, but we can't bring wheelchairs into the Gaza Strip because they could be used for other things. So that's this dual-use point. So there's lots of things that we can depict looking at this area, which is horrible. I would also agree to the colleague. I'm a journalist as well. I think if this kind of film could be broadcast in ARD or ZDF, the German equivalents of BBC, and I think we can clearly answer that question by it's not going to be broadcast. However, I think that should be done. So what would it be possible to show this in other cities, showing it to doctors, showing it to journalists? How can we get the film? How can we get it? Is Channel 4 online? Can we see it online? And I think the journalists have to be pressured to change their reports. And how do we get the pressure on the German government up? That's the crucial question. And sorry, the Greens were not famous in the government. They were very silent. And it's very sad to see this. I estimate the Greens, and they failed completely. So I think the Böll-Stiftung for doing this kind of event. Maybe there is capability to learn. So how do we set up the pressure? We don't have time. The people are starving, and starvation is systematic of generations mentally not being able to develop the capacity that they need to. So how do we get to build up this pressure together? Ramita, do you want to answer that? How the film can be made accessible?
Sure. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but VPN. So, because I want as many people to see this as possible. So yeah, Channel 4 website. God, I hope this isn't going to go out publicly. Channel 4 will not be happy with me. VPN or Zeteo. And Zeteo, you have to pay. It's behind a paywall. And I would quickly say that, yes, I love hearing fellow journalists talk like this, because also, as a fellow journalist, I'm also really ashamed of our profession. And I have seen, Guy, to speak of what you said, which is the dehumanization of Palestinians. And I've seen this bleed into our profession. Only when was it? Was it the day before yesterday? There was an attack where 12 Israelis were killed. Every single life is worth the same. And the news in Britain led on that. And it was the front page on in the Times and the foreign pages, and there was no mention of any Gazan deaths. And that day, over 70 Gazans had been killed in attacks. Again, I see this with the way our colleagues have covered the deaths of Palestinian journalists. parroting Israel's lies about their Hamas associations.
I want to thank for the courage and the strength of you, although you know people who are on site after this film, to sit here. Thank you for that. And I'd like to say that it's been translated. So I think that the focus on Gaza is okay, it's right. We only talk about Gaza, and in West Bank, similar things are going on. The Israeli detention camp, we talked about sexual abuse. We've been having these reports for decades. Everybody knows about this. I have a friend who was brought to the detention center a couple of years ago, and he found his father there. And the first thing his father asked him is how he was abused. And I wanted to ask a question to the Doctors Without Borders. In Lebanon, we see a similar structure of the attacks in medical institutions. I was there with journalists of the Independent Humanitarian on site. It's documented, but there's little talk about it. This structure is not only seeing there at an intensity level which deserves the emphasis quite clearly, but Israel is attacking so many areas, destroying medical institutions. That South Lebanon, it was attacked 2 times when I was with the Red Cross. So this should be part of the discussion as well. Now, Lebanon is not mentioned in the text. Gaza is mentioned. Why is Gaza not Palestine? So these are things that are strange in the German context, that you don't write Palestine, you leave the West Bank out. Well, maybe we wanted to show the film on Gaza today. This is why we focused in the text on Gaza as well. It's not about neglecting all the rest, all the other nations, Israel, Yemen. So everything is listed with names, and Gaza is there alone. So we had, again, pointing out yesterday, an event with on that with Palestine, only Palestinian speakers. So it is not by intent that we didn't put Palestine in the text here. Well, one more thing. I want to quote someone for the 2 who are not here. A friend of mine said that in Germany you fight for the freedom of opinion and assembly, in Palestine instead for fighting for the Palestinians. Well, do you want to talk about Lebanon? I didn't really hear the question. It was a bit confusing what you said. I tried to refer to that earlier on, that in the context, the patterns are the same. Before the panel, I looked it up. There's a good database, aidworkerssecurity.org, where we see in Lebanon this unfortunate trend is rising. So it is clear that we do see similar patterns there in the West Bank. We just brought out a new report where we talked about the increasing violence and the restrictions of helps of aid organizations. That will be too much detail. Very important anyway. One brief point concerning the evacuations, the evacuation orders. We didn't talk about that earlier. This is a pattern that we have shown in the Lebanon attacks, and we see that in the film as well, and again in the current discussion. The evacuation orders and warnings in general with the are done with the papers thrown into the air. That has no legal base. If these evacuation warnings are issued, they have to be with time. It has to be clear where the people should go then. There's no secure place in Gaza. Usually in the report of Lebanon, we show that evacuation orders or warnings are given at night with little lead time and no secure places indicated, and in the hospitals, it's clear there's people, there's newborns, there's ill people. Evacuation is not possible. And this is a part of this Israeli narrative on the government, again, that we do warn the people. And this is important, really, to take a close look at what this really is. I would like to ask Guy, he's briefly mentioned it. I'd be interested to hear what is the actual reaction on side of the medical institutions in Israel, be it hospitals, doctors. There is a big share of Palestinian people working in Israel, probably more than any other profession in Israel. What's it really like on site if Physicians for Human Rights bring out a report? I see in the media, I see silence. Are people scared to speak out, or is it just as hardened as the rest of the society is?
All right. This is actually a very painful topic. I mean, from one aspect, we shouldn't have expectations from doctors or medical workers more than any other person, right? Doctors are people too. I mean, and they're susceptible to incitement and to racism and to hatred. But then we have other expectations because of the profession of how caring for another person and how having this intimate kind of knowledge of pain and of this very basic human act of caring for another person. So we do have, I guess, expectations. And we've been very much disappointed from the Israeli medical establishment for many reasons. I can touch upon them quickly. There's actually an article that we published, I think it was 2 months ago, in the New York Review, if you want to look it up. It's called The Shame of Israeli Medicine. And we deal with the different violations that we see. First of all, as mentioned in the film, doctors who outright just violated medical ethics against Palestinians. Hospitals who denied care from Palestinians. I mean, directors of hospitals who publicly said they're not going to allow Palestinians to be admitted to the hospital. We have evidence of Palestinian detainees being released from hospitals, public hospitals, not the militarized facilities such as the State Iman that we've seen in the film. Public civilian hospitals, detainees who were released before the treatment was completed, treatment that was given without anesthesia. We have evidence of victim of sexual abuse who was hospitalized in an Israeli civilian hospital and then was released back to the facility where he was abused, to his attackers. These are all violations of medical ethics. We've seen doctors, Israeli doctors, calling on Israel to bomb Gaza hospitals. More than 80 doctors who signed a petition to do so. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of Palestinian medical workers in Israel. More than 20% of the doctors are Palestinians. Almost 50% of new doctors in Israel are Palestinian citizens. And that's another way of the silencing of the entire Palestinian population in Israel. Doctors have been fired, disciplined, censored, just for the very basic social media posts about that showing empathy to children in Gaza. People were fired. I know a few of my friends, Palestinian doctors, who were either disciplined or fired for the most really basic cause for the stop of the war, for example. So this is why and I mentioned it before, we call on the international medical community to act, and to act very, we would like to see that effectively against the Israeli Medical Association and against and calling on and pressuring the Israeli medical establishment to do something. Because medicine is a global profession, right? Doctors go on conferences, they publish articles, they do research together in other countries. So this is a group that is very much connected to the international community, and we think that international community should be very clear about the ethical standards that should be followed. And as I said, there's also I can send also links for other readings.
Ja, ich bin den Anwesenden oder den Vertretern der Organisation dankbar, dass sie das Dokument.
I thank the organizers here to document this, especially the Israeli groups. I'm a doctor myself. I have to say it's a difficult issue for us. The pressure of the last weeks. The German Chamber of Doctors has decided to at least make a soft declaration. So I'd be interested to hear what other organizations did. I know for Germany there's some NGOs, Medico International is active in this, trying to get an alliance to get the physicians to take actions. I'm a member of EIWPPVW, who have come up with a quite progressive declarations in the past weeks and months. Things are changing also, I think, under the impression that what is going on is comparable to a medicide, so a parallel analog to a genocide, the intended destruction of medical infrastructure. But the question is, how do we get the politicians to move? I think your question was very good. Where are your red lines? That's the questions that we should really ask. That's going to open a new discussion and change the focus. Remark on the moderator, don't talk about the disaster of starvation. Call it targeted starvation, please.
In der dritten, bitte? Aushungern und ausdursten, ja.
Ja, auch ich möchte mich gerne bedanken.
So I would like to thank all your work of the film and on the panel, which is irreplaceable, really. I would be interested, we've talked about it's difficult to evacuate people from Gaza. I've had the opposite question. Can people go in? Doctors from all the world, that's where Doctors Without Borders does. How does that work? I recall article of a German Palestinian doctor who would go there, who would like to go there, but he wouldn't be evacuated due to the Palestinian passport. So is that an individual case, or what? Maybe you could explain how this works, maybe from the German side or the Israeli NGO. How difficult is it to get in? It's a very interesting topic. It's very difficult to get in. We've heard this. Journalists are not let in at all. And for us, it's extremely difficult to get the rotation. So often, in these extreme contexts, people don't stay there 6 months shorter as well, because they have very specific skills that are sort of. So sometimes they only have 8 weeks, and we want to rotate more, but usually we don't get the visa. We often don't get the visa. So it's a similar arbitrariness like in other restrictions. Sometimes lorries are let in, sometimes they're not. So the same applies to visa. So it's a similar pattern we see in Sudan as well. Here we see that the stems are just as lethal as the bombs are, because traveling visa not being issued means we are not allowed to go to places. We can't provide the supply of medical material. We can't get it moved. And in Gaza, it's extreme. Here we really see again and again that we don't get visa, we get them delayed, and so on. Yes. Well, we have to come to an end. We have overdrawn a bit. I think, Ramita, you could follow the gratefulness for the film as a very important document. Do you? Thanks for coming here. Especially, it was very important for you to be here. Do you want to make a closing remark?
thank you very much for coming here. It was important to you to come here and to be here. Would you like to just convey a last message to the audience?
Thank you so much for coming. And I've been, watching on the news the German police's reactions to people who have been protesting. So for me, it was extra important that I came. So it means a lot that you're watching it. I want to spread the word. I would also like to, send my deepest respects to these two women from organizations that are really doing incredible, important work. And it's going to be your organizations who are going to be presenting evidence in The Hague. There are also two doctors here. I won't identify them because they probably don't want to be identified. I think they've had a long day. But as well as the Palestinian doctors who are absolute heroes, there are two doctors here who are international doctors who have been going in and out of Gaza, and people like Guy as well. So anyone who speaks out in this current environment, is really brave and heroic, and only through people like them is anything going to change.
Thank you. Ich möchte Ihnen auch allen zum Abschluss danken. Ich hoffe, dass der Abend ein Anstoß.
To finish off with, I'd like to thank you, everybody, and hope that this initiates the discussion with politicians, change the minds of the politicians. I think we've heard a lot of the distance between politics and civil society. This is why I wanted to get the organization in, providing a platform and get them here to maybe bridge that gap a little bit. I would like to thank Louisa Ree, my colleague in the back, who has been carrying the microphones around. She was the one who did the organization in the background. Thank you very much. And also, I'd like to thank the interpreters. Maybe it was a bit of a difficult job to go along as quickly as it was said, although also our technical colleagues as well. Thank you. And we have to carry up the discussion. Thank you, Guy, for joining us as well. Thank you and goodbye.